Rain off this morning. Okay, sorry. I now have created the live stream. Yay. Today is the Ides of March. So the Ides of March, very famously, the day upon which Julius Caesar was murdered on the floor of the Senate in Rome, back in the BC times. And always, in Shakespeare's play, Julius Caesar is warned to beware by a soothsayer, right, a fortune teller, to beware the Ides of March. So today's the Ides of March, so beware the Ides of March. This is my head's in a tizzy because it's the Ides of March. And, other things happening. Again, much to be revealed. All right, so I'm sorry for the people who are hoping for the live stream. I really did forget to put it up, and I'm very sorry. I checked the microphone, and then I forgot to turn the live stream on because I'm stupid. And that's okay. It's Friday, right? Okay, so we're talking about cheap sex, right? So sex, really risky for women, so they tended to want a lot of compensation in return, right? So marriage, someone with a good job, someone who's financially stable, all of these things in order to, let them have sex with them. So now that has been really the human condition for the bulk of human history, right? That because it is so risky for women, sex has been expensive for men. Until we reach, today. Well, not today. Really the 1960s. And you get a really novel invention of human beings called the pill, right? The pill kind of changes everything. And this is what Regnerus is kind of talking about, right? So he says that the sexual revolution and the birth control pill in particular starts this process by which we move from expensive sex to cheap sex. And basically he says that cheap sex is a modern phenomenon now, and it's a triangulation brought about by contraception, online dating, and pornography. Okay, internet pornography in particular. All right, so what does that mean? Like why? Okay, artificial contraception is probably the most critical one because it fundamentally separates, at least in principle, sex from conception, right? Sex from having babies. You can now, like in the past, if you started having sex with someone, no contraception, within a year, right? You had something like an 80% chance that person was going to get pregnant, right? Like that's just like straight up statistics. Even today, people who are not using contraception, it's about an 80% chance that within a year, the woman will be pregnant. So, artificial contraception obviously changes that. It separates conception and sex and allows women a lot more sexual freedom. But it also, because it reduces the risk, it also, according to Regnerus, reduces the price that they feel they need to charge. Again, very markety terms. For sex, right? They need less investment from their sexual partners in order to agree to have sex with them. And you have, what do they call it? Now I'm thinking of a term. It creates what's called a collective action problem, right? So it creates, collective action problems are basically where, because a lot of people start shifting in one particular direction, it makes it really, really hard to go against the grain, right? So even if, say, you didn't particularly want to have sex with someone, right? Or you wanted to wait till you get married, or you wanted to wait until the relationship is established, right? You're not into, the kind of social script that people should have sex by like the third or the fifth date, kind of at the latest, which again is my understanding of what the script kind of looks like today. In the past, right, everybody had the kind of same script, wait till marriage. Some people violated that, but on the whole, the collective action was to wait. Today, the collective action has tended to move towards more permissive sexual attitudes, which means it's harder for people who want to delay sex to actually do so, right? Because, if you're not willing to have sex with someone, they will pretty easily find another partner who will. So it creates a collective action problem because the collective is moving into, everybody having sex earlier. It becomes harder and harder to resist that pull, even if that's not your personal preference. Okay, so I guess I I forgot to tell you where he got his data. He got this out of the Relationships in America survey of about 15, well, almost 16,000 Americans, 18 to 60. So pretty good amount of data. Okay, so contraception, right? By separating sex from conception, creates conditions where women are more likely to have sex earlier, and creates this kind of collective action snowball where people start having sex earlier and earlier in relationships. And we see that kind of rolling on from the boomers, where still people are looking for some level of commitment, down to, kind of hookup culture where having sex becomes very, very easy. Okay, so that one's pretty obvious. Online dating, I think, is actually the one. I think online dating is a really interesting one because I think it acts in a way that we maybe don't typically conceive of. But what online dating essentially does is it increases the pool of available partners to a huge extent. All right, so let's put it in these terms, right? If you went back to an era prior to online dating, how would you find someone who you wanted to date and potentially have sex with? Well, you would have to approach people that were in your kind of general vicinity, right? Your social circle, friends of friends, maybe there's a matchmaker, someone who connects people or something like that. But generally speaking, this is what Regnerus says, your pool of available kind of potential romantic and sexual partners is probably somewhere in the range of somewhere between 100 and 200 people, right? Because, by the time you count all of your immediate people right, plus friends of friends, maybe, family connections who could like set you up with someone. It's community connections, people you went to school with, all of these sorts of things. It's a relatively small pool of people that you can connect with. And what happens with online dating is that pool is essentially exploded. So you go from 100 or 200 kind of at the outside to thousands, potentially tens of thousands of potential partners. So the number of people that you could particularly couple with increases exponentially. Now, some commentators have suggested that this leads in some ways to a sort of romantic or sexual FOMO, right? A fear of missing out. And Sherry Turkle talks about this in her book called Reclaiming Conversations, where she talks about how kind of online technologies have shifted a whole bunch of aspects of our lives. And in romance, she tells a really interesting anecdote, right? Where she was talking to college undergrads about their romantic lives, and she was talking, asking them about online dating and how online dating had affected things. And she interviewed one particular young woman, and this young woman, basically confessed to something that had happened a few nights prior, where she had, met someone, and they had, gone back to her place, had sex. She had enjoyed it. Everything was great. He was off in the bathroom, and she picked up her phone and immediately started scrolling on Tinder to see what else was available. And this is the sort of problem that online dating creates, right? It creates a fear of missing out. Like, okay, this person seems lovely, but what if there's lovelier, right? What if there's better? What if there's an even better choice? Let me go and compare. And you almost turn, and Turkle phrases it this way, romantic relationships into a form of comparison shopping, right? Where you're always like, okay, well, what does this model offer? Sorry, like we're talking about cars, right? But that's the kind of metaphor, and that's what online dating does. It commodifies people, right? It turns them into commodities. They self-commodify, right? Because everybody, you can go on Reddit and look at, basically people critiquing each other's Tinder profiles and helping people tweak it so that you get the best shot at getting, sex with someone or into a relationship or something like that, right? So it creates a much larger pool, much more competition, but also, many more potential candidates, which makes it less likely that you're going to tolerate the kind of flaws that you might find in a human being, right? You start dating someone, you date for a while, but you have all of these comparisons in the back of your head, and you know that there's other people, tens of thousands of other people out there who could potentially be romantic partners. I have to always think now of how to pronounce your name. And I'm like, okay, then I go back to my Star Trek example, a Moog.
So, this like sexual FOMO, is it only for people that are already in the online dating market, or is it for both like people entering the online dating market and people that are in the market?
So, I mean, it would be principally for people who've already engaged in online dating, but increasingly, one of the things that Regnerus will suggest is that this is almost everybody, right? Because it's coupled with a decline in a lot of the other institutions that people used to meet in, right? So things like the sort of decline of religious institutions as a sort of common space, social clubs, political parties, all, community leagues, all sorts of other collective action kind of organizations. Online dating has become the way most people meet now, right? And so it's not everybody 100%, but it's almost everybody is at least being touched by this. And even people who aren't are aware that it's there, right? So there's always this sense that maybe there's something better out there. So yeah, I mean, I understand Tinder is a hive of scum and villainy and unwanted phallic images, from what I understand, though I have never used it and I never will. I did joke with my wife one time that I needed to create a Tinder profile for research for one of my classes, which she thought was very funny, and then said no. Right? No. It was just like, no. So, okay. So online dating, right? Creates a bigger pool, creates that kind of collective, or that kind of problem of FOMO, right? Fear that there's a better partner out there. And you'll see this in reflections from young people, right? That they maybe don't know why they were cast aside by a romantic partner, or they cast aside someone because of minor flaws. So it becomes like an episode of the sitcom Seinfeld, where Seinfeld and his friends are kind of tossing away potential partners because the hands are too big or something like that. Okay, so the last one is porn. And porn, he thinks, is probably the most, or I'll put the line here, it's probably the most influential of all. So basically, he says that porn is by far the cheapest sex of all, right? So I have it right here, right? It is easily the cheapest sex of all in that it's essentially free. And this, this in a sense goes back to what Naomi Wolf was saying, in that quote I have from Wolf a little bit earlier in this slide deck. Porn has a few advantages. It's free. You can find exactly whatever happens to appeal to you, right? These portals like Pornhub and all of the tube sites that are run by this very sketchy company that I think at a certain point was based in Montreal. Not the greatest thing Montreal's ever known for. But, right, you can find almost anything you want in terms of your particular sexual desires or sexual interests in the form of pornography, and it costs you nothing. Whereas, actually dealing with a human being is difficult. It's time consuming. It's ultimately worthwhile, but it can be very, very difficult. People want things, people have desires, they have their own emotions. They maybe don't want to have sex with you exactly when you want to have sex with them. There's a lot of navigation in relationships with potential sexual partners. And it's really difficult, and porn isn't, right? Porn is easy. It's cheap, it's easy. When you're done, how to put this, there's no cuddling, right? There's no, there's no debate as to whether you, make breakfast for the person or take them out for breakfast, because you just close the screen on your phone and that person is gone and never existed to begin with, right? So it's incredibly cheap and easy. Now, for a lot of people, according to Regnerus, it becomes a sort of replacement for having sex with real people, right? Porn is so cheap and easy that people don't have to try, and they stop trying, right? Because, meeting people is hard, and actually making yourself worthwhile to people is really, really difficult. And so you get a really, so if I see your hand, Mia, I promise. I didn't ignore you when I walked by you and looked straight at you. What was I thinking? Yeah, compared to, getting into a relationship, it's really difficult. And that, for Regnerus, is why we're seeing that sexual recession, right? Especially amongst men, right? If we go right back to the beginning, should I do it? I want to go right back to the beginning. I'm really sorry. I'm going to give you an aneurysm. Da, 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 da. Right? We see this percentage, right? These 43%. Oh, I'm writing in white. You did it to yourself. Right? We see this percentage, right? This 43% of men. Now, it's not all of them, right, that are using pornography in replacement of sexual partners, but it seems likely that at least some percentage of them are, right? Because it's so much easier. Yeah, Mia. Well, I fast forward back to, what's that? Oh, awesome. I anticipated your question even before you asked it. Aren't I clever? Don't feel too good about yourself, Broussard. All right. Because you've changed the pen back to red. Okay. So, I mean, that's basically cheap sex, right? Basically, all of these things, right? Artificial contraception, online dating, and pornography all put a sort of negative pressure on a lot of the things we've seen, millennials and Gen Z sort of fleeing from. Relationship formation, especially long-term relationships, right? Again, it's something that happens much later. And this is something that Regnerus will say. It's not that people don't want to get into long-term relationships, but all of these things make it so easy and so cheap to have sex that it gets put off, right? And it's getting put off longer and longer until people sort of hit this, equilibrium point where they're starting to think like, oh, now it's time for me to have kids. It's time for me to stop. I don't know what term you want to use. Going for the easy sex, the cheap sex. It's time for me to kind of get serious in terms of relationships. It happens. It's just the age of it is going up and up and up, right? Because there's no, one of the reasons that people got married young was because, honestly, and this probably sounds terrible, people do want to have sex. And if the only way to have sex was to get married, you got married relatively young. Now it's really easy to have sex without getting married. And so it's something that it changes the whole cultural script. It becomes a sort of capstone, something you do when you've achieved all your goals, made all your conquests, and you're on to, the life goal of have kids and I don't know what else. And all of that stuff, right? But it pushes it later and later. It's really changed. It's transformed these three technologies, according to Regnerus. I think he's right. Whether you love the market metaphor or not, and there's lots of reasons to think it's a little bit dismissive, say, of women. But it really, the cheaper sex is, I think it's safe to say, and I think he's correct here, is it contributes to that negative pressure, right? So it makes it less necessary to get married, to form long-term relationships, to have children, right? All of those things kind of get pushed off because sex is so easy and it's separated from its natural sort of consequences. Okay. Oh, I told you at the end of the last time that this is like a 20, 30-minute slide. There's a lot on there. Okay. I already touched on this a little bit. So, in terms of LGBTQ identities, we've seen a big shift as well. I talked about this, when we talked about Gen Z with Twengi, but I just want to reiterate it quickly because I do think it's worth noting in the sense that it's definitely a huge cultural shift, right? Something is going on from a social perspective that has caused, LGBTQ people to identify more readily within the kind of framework of LGBTQ plus or 2S LGBTQ plus. I say that one less because I always trip over the 2S part. Okay, so if we look at a bunch of data, right, and this is pretty consistent worldwide. We see the same thing in Canada, but these are statistics from the US. And this, relatively recent data, about 3 years old from Gallup. So it's a really, reputable polling firm. We see a kind of steady increase over time in the percentage of people identifying as LGBTQ. In 2012 was about 3.5%. By 2020 is about, a little bit over 5.5%. So not a huge shift, but a shift upward nonetheless. Okay, so. Okay, what am I looking at here? Sorry. So yeah, which of the following do you consider yourself to be? As you know, amongst LGBTQ US adults, right? We basically see that the biggest categories are these two, right? So we've got gay and bisexual. Almost half of LGBTQ people or LGBT people in the US identify as bisexual, right? So it's about half of those. And oh, I just thought of something from the last slide that I forgot to tell you that I really want to tell you. Can I go back? I should go back. It's actually from 2 slides ago. I'm sorry. Back to here. I'm sorry. It jumped into my head. I'm really sorry. Because I was reading another book, and this is, I'm sorry. Okay, this is one of the things that online dating. Because I want to say this about online dating, and I actually think it's really interesting. There's a real case to be made, and this is made by Louise Perry, who's she's kind of a British public intellectual, a feminist, and she wrote a book called The Case Against the Sexual Revolution. Well, she basically, from a feminist perspective, makes the case as I think is really interesting and provocative. Conservatives have loved her, but she doesn't make, I think, a conservative case at all. That the best thing for women is marriage and family, even from a feminist perspective, and that the current dating culture kind of stinks. One of the things that she says about online dating in particular that I think is really interesting is that online dating makes men assholes. In the sense that there is no, in online dating, there's no social responsibility. And I think this is really kind of interesting. I will 100% ask a question about this. Okay, so what does that mean? And the reason I had to come back is because it jumped into my head and I really wanted to mention it. Okay, so one of the things she says is, in the old world, right? In the pre-Tinder and pre-online dating world, if you wanted to date, right, maybe one of your friends connects you with one of their friends, right? So, let's say you're male and you're looking for a romantic partner, and your friend, we'll call her Tanya, I don't know why, is like, I think you would be a really great match for, my friend Cindy. So she connects the two of you. You have a sort of social obligation in that scenario, right? If you act like a complete jerk and show Cindy pictures of your wiener, sorry to be too graphic, in a way that grosses her out and she feels super uncomfortable, she's going to tell Tanya that you're a complete asshole, and then you have to deal with your own friend, right? Or maybe your cousin or whoever it happened to be that set you up on this date. So there is a social responsibility in the old kind of dating culture where you were connected through existing social networks to not be a complete jerkwad. Online dating, shall we say, removes that particular responsibility. And, not for nothing, right, do we now see men acting fairly awful to women online in these online dating systems, right? And, I think it was John Oliver who joked that Tinder should be renamed An Endless Series of Unwanted Dick Pics, and that should actually be the title of the app. This would have been inconceivable in the past that people would behave this way towards basically complete strangers, but it happens now because, and I think Perry's right about this, we've been relieved of social responsibility because you're not actually socially connected to that person yet, right? You don't know them, you don't know their friends, you don't know their relatives, right? You're not connected to them, and if you act like a jerk, there's no social consequences. So one of the things that kept us from acting like jerks was, you want to go back to SOC 100, is that your social diversion in terms of, acting impolitely, your violation of folkways would have ended with social consequences, and it no longer does. Okay, I really am done with this slide now. I'm sorry. Perry's book is really interesting, and I really do recommend it. Okay, I'm back to this slide, and I forgot what I was talking about. Good day. I said good day. Okay. So, yeah, basically amongst LGBTQ adults, right, we see gay and bisexual being the biggest two categories. The next two that are roughly even are lesbian and transgender, and then a small kind of percentage describing themselves as other. Right, and as a share of the US population, they're all quite small, right? Less than 1% for lesbians. Bisexuals are about 3%. And then, transgender, about 0.6% of the overall population. Okay, so the picture again is quite different if we look at it in terms of generational cohorts, right? And what we see, is really what's interesting, I think, is when we get here, right? These two cohorts. Um, you know, this one always confuses me. It's like, how do you have no opinion? What the hell does that mean? Why was this a survey option? Okay, this is like problems with survey design 101. Sometimes it's okay to just force people to make a choice and not give them the out. And clearly Gallup was like, we need to give people an out. So it's like, are you LGBT or heterosexual? I have no opinion. Like, what does that mean? This means social desirability bias. I don't want to say. Sorry. I teach survey design, and this is like an example one for what you shouldn't do. Okay, anyway, because people obviously, I think, know their sexuality, probably. All right, so what's interesting here, right, is that we do see, a couple of interesting things. The percentage of people who identify as LGBT, and again, this is 2021. The numbers have actually gone up since then for Gen Z. It's a huge difference, right? The gulf between this number and this number is enormous. So we've got an interesting phenomenon, right? Things don't usually change this quickly, right? I actually like this kind of change from 1.3 to 3.8. I think all kind of makes sense in terms of changing social attitudes, right, around acceptance of LGBTQ individuals. That all makes sense. That kind of jump, it's huge. It's, I think you don't typically see social phenomenon going in that direction at that speed. Okay. And again, like if we look at the generational kind of growth, so bisexual, right? If we look at the difference again between the trads or even Gen X, right, a relatively contemporary generation, or millennials and Gen Z, right? The growth, like basically, people identifying as bisexual more than doubled in a single generation. Gay stayed roughly the same. Lesbian, grew a little bit, but stayed, I don't think it's out of this world change. Transgender, the same, went up a little bit. The growth of people identifying as bisexual in Gen Z is a really, really interesting phenomenon. It's a big, again, social change from the past. Yeah. Oh, no one knows how to word this question properly. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I get what you're throwing down. So some people have suspected that it's a phenomenon that's sometimes referred to as bug. Bisexual until graduation. Now, I'm not a huge advocate of this, but it's like if there's a sort of social cachet, and there may be, and this is one of the theories as to why this particular trend has happened, and you get a lot of pushback from LGBTQ individuals who say, being LGBT is still not cool and still not really that socially accepted. But there is another school of thought that says, as we've had more things like Pride months, as we've put LGBTQ individuals more front and center culturally, it has become a big social movement, and acceptance of LGBTQ people has become more prominent in society and more important, especially to Gen Z. You're going to move more people into, this category, which kind of makes sense if you look at the number. But that for a lot of people, and, if we looked at it, if we broke it down, like 80% of this, bisexual number is female, right? And so it potentially, and again, I don't want to endorse this argument. I'm just going to tell you what it is that you have a lot of people wanting to attach themselves to, say, an LGBT identity. So they're saying, I'm bisexual. The bulk of them will never have sex, or at least not consistently with a person of the same sex. It might be kind of like hooking up. You make out, with another girl at a party. So you say you're bisexual. And then, I was talking with my colleague Ashley, about this, and she was saying she knew a lot of these. She's a lesbian, but she knew a lot of these people in high school who were like, "Oh, I'm bisexual," and she said they're all married with kids now, right? So there is this possibility that it's a sort of social identification for the purposes of sort of attaching yourself to an identity that they see as socially favored, right? And that's definitely one of the arguments that's been made, is that, you know, and a lot, once you get into some of that big spectrum of sexual identities that's available now, people will attach to these different ones, again, potentially so they can be part of that bigger kind of umbrella of LGBTQ, right? Now, again, I don't want to endorse that because I don't know. And I think that's probably a little bit simplistic, though there probably are people who, yeah, want to attach themselves in some way to the LGBT movement and how prominent it's become socially. And yeah, there probably is a lot of like, I don't know, people think it's cool or sexy to be bisexual. So you're going to say, oh yeah, I'm bisexual, even if you never act on it, right? And I mean, there's bug is one, but you know, lug is the other side, like lesbian until graduation. Is it? Yeah, please.
Would you say that might have something to do with just like the sexualization, with specifically women, with the sexualization and sexualization of like lesbians?
100%, yeah. Especially in kind of mainstream pornography, right? And this is why I said, you know, when we looked at that infographic, you know, what is it, like 67% of boys have seen a same-sex relationship. It's almost always fetishized lesbianism, right? Where it's false lesbianism for male pleasure, right? So I do think there's a very big kind of way that pornography also plays into this discussion, where it's like, yeah, it's been depicted as very alluring for women to be same-sex attracted, right? To be attracted to other women and to be having sex with other women. So that this sounds stupid, in the quest to gain male attention, pretending to be bisexual or a lesbian is a possible pathway towards that, right? Again, it's probably a minority, right? And there's probably a lot of other things going on here, but it's definitely an argument that's been made off of this data from Gallup. So, and again, that's not to say that it's like a fake LGBTQ movement, but that's one of the possible explanations for this really, really big jump, you know, from here 2 generations ago to here, right? Because it's a big, big jump. Okay. Yes, more people are identifying as such each generation, 100%. Thanks for using the Slido. Okay. I'm out of slides. I'm out of slides? I thought this slide deck went on forever. I thought this was just the rest of the course right here. 8 minutes. That presents us with a possible conundrum. That's really early to start. Okay, let's do preamble for the next one. I'm sorry, I just can't. I know it's Friday. I'll still let you go a little early, but I can't let you go that early. That would be nice, and I'm not nice. I am nice, but not that nice. Okay, it's the thing we were supposed to do before the last midterm. Ta-da! Okay. Oh, youth and religion. Okay. If you took sociology, yeah, please. No? I think they're in the lecture 2. They're in the kind of section for midterm 2. Yeah, Mia. Yes, we are going to get to it. It's going to come right after this. We're going to youth and crime right after religion. But I like religion better, so I'm doing it first. For obvious reasons. Okay. Yeah, if you look in the folder, I should have moved it, and I forgot because my brain is not working anymore. Okay, this has a different Slido. Da-da, da-da, da-da. Moving on. Okay. So, these slides, I've used these in so many classes. Oh my goodness. All right. So, when we talk about religion, and if you want to learn much more about religion, register in 376 with me next year. It'll be fun, I promise. Basically, what we see long term is a pattern of religious disaffiliation. Now, this is true amongst all of our active generations, right? The silents obviously disaffiliating the least, millennials, and then Gen Z disaffiliating the most. Okay, so what we have seen basically in the last couple of decades is the rise, really starting in the early 2000s, is the rise of this purple line. What's sometimes referred to as no religion. Also, you'll see, the nuns, not the nuns, Not these nuns. No. These nuns. When I talk about nuns, I think I genuinely confused people at one point. They were like, there's so many more nuns than there used to be. I'm like, no, there are not more nuns. There are more nuns. Okay, it's a terrible term. No religion, right? That's the big story right now. And the story that everybody's talking about in terms of source of religion is the growth in this particular cohort of nothing in particular. Oops, that's an S. NOP, nothing in particular, nuns, or no religion, right? It's grown just tremendously. This has been kind of in proportion to the, yes. Oh, did I take it out? Oh, I took it. Hang on. All right. Class dismissed. I may have taken it out thinking I'd move it here. You've seen all of these before. You took source of religion. Okay, let me make sure it's there. I could be wrong. I could be a crazy person. I am a crazy person. All right. Well, I'm just going to put them in because I thought I had them in there, but I maybe am wrong. Pride Week. Just what we were talking about. And now people at home are deeply, deeply confused. Okay. Well, we won't touch anything. I'll just restart this next time. This is source of youth, right? I'm here on the right day. And I'll make... Sorry, when the music starts, the dance party begins. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to embarrass you. I just got excited. All right, let's put in... Okay, where are we? What are we doing? You're leaving. Goodbye. I lost youth and religion. There it is. I will put it back. I cannot. All right, you can leave, I promise. I'll fix this. All right, let's put it back in. And we'll talk about it on Monday. We'll do religion. It's only going to take another week. It should be good. Oh, I need the PDF, don't I? Religion. Okay. Okay, and... Name. Crime. You as well. I'm going to take a minute and fix this. Where is youth and religion? There it is. Je reparé. Buenos dias. Shelby just likes to bug me. No. Sometimes I don't do it for hours. There's too many things. Honestly, like one of my biggest complaint with doing live streams